The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to the Weird Tales Radio Show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic, and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Weird Tales Radio Show. I'm Charles Christian, and thank you very much for tuning in again. This is a big week for us here on Weird Tales as it's our 100th episode. Unfortunately, we don't have time to celebrate it as we have a very full show today. Taken over by a fascinating interview with Las Vegas-based spiritual life coach Ellen Red. It's all about near-death experiences, astral projection, alchemical marriage, achieving spiritual awakening, and the Akashic records. So let's start with a bit of background. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, Ellen?
Yes, I don't know where to begin here. I kind of had an extremely unusual upbringing, and I had a near-death experience when I was a 4-year-old, and that kind of led me, that amongst many other experiences in my life, kind of led me into the esoteric world and learning how to communicate with non-physical dimensions and things like that. And then eventually throughout my life, I ended up about 10 years ago having a really extremely profound, full-blown Kundalini activation and awakening. And that ended up introducing me to my alchemical partner, or my soul partner. I don't know if your audience has heard of that a lot, but it's called a twin flame. A lot of other people call it a divine partnership, but it's your alchemical mate. And so I was introduced in an out-of-body experience to this person, and then later met them in the physical world and went through a whole journey with them in that regard. So I don't know, I've just had a lot of different things going on.
Yeah, it sounds it. Now, tell us a bit more about that then. So, I mean, people say, oh, well, you know, you're my soulmate as a sort of general term, but this is more than just, you know, the sort of normal matrimonial or relationship type soulmate. This is different in...
Yeah, it really actually is. And I can see how a lot of people would get really confused about, a soulmate feeling like it's the same, the twin flame or the divine partner, because the feelings are the same usually when we fall in love with somebody and we feel like they're familiar to us and all that. We kind of go through the same feelings. But in this case, it happens to be that they're actually made in your soul with you. So you don't have to go outside of yourself to find them, if you will, even though they have a separate body from yours.
Right. So how do you then meet them in the real world then?
Well, that would be completely magic, I guess.
Oh, right.
But so I can just tell you kind of what I experienced, because yes. It was magic actually in a way. But so what happened was I had my heart broken by another mate that I believed was my soulmate. I was receiving psychic downloads and spiritual visions and things like that about this divine partner. And I had never really thought about it before. I just, dated in my life and I had this person I thought was my soulmate, and then they died, and so on and so forth throughout the years. And so, but I never really thought, oh, I was made this way. And then I got with this partner, and I started having these psychic downloads and everything else. And eventually, he ended up breaking my heart. And the whole time that I was going through the relationship, I was really practicing trying to love him from an unconditional standpoint, meaning, the balance of my worthiness of love versus the balance of him being worthy of love and me loving him without trying to control him or anything else. And so I was walking those steps throughout that relationship, but eventually I got my heart broken and it kind of like split open in half. And as that happened, I had an out of body experience. I came out of my body, and I was really in prayer mode and seeking understanding, because I was really not obviously thrilled about having a broken heart. And when I say broken, I mean it ripped. Yes. And so I went into kind of a prayer mode, and I went straight to source, if you will. And I kind of like had a out of body experience. In that experience, I saw when I got to source, I saw that there was that we were made in soul, male and female together. And I don't know how to describe it. It's really hard sometimes to describe these types of things because spiritual language is so different from human, perception. Yeah. But anyhow, I had come out of body, gone to source, gone through dimensions, and saw lots of things. And then I saw that we were made together in partnership with a mate. And then about a month or two later, I actually met this person in the physical world, and it took me about 9 more months to really realize that he was the energy that I felt when I had gone to source. So when I went to source, I had a full-blown knowing that I was made with this, partner, and that this is how we were made, and all that. But it took me a while for them to show up in the physical world and to really actually resonate. And how that happened is beyond me. I couldn't even tell you. It was magic. I couldn't have told you how we ended up resonating together. It was through Facebook, and it was through another lady. But then many years have gone by now. It's been almost 10 years. But in the beginning, we did a lot of meditation and things like that. So I would be in my own house. He lives in California. I live in Vegas, and I would be in my house meditating, and he'd be in his house meditating within our own selves. And then he would confirm things on the computer, like, oh, didn't I pass the touch test? Because I was giving him I'm like, if this is really real, just touch me somewhere, And then I could feel this little impression on my leg. And then a couple of weeks later, he would say something in the physical world to confirm that really did happen. It wasn't something I was just making up in my mind. So we went through this type of experience over quite a few months until I really embraced, wow, this isn't just me living in this skin. There's more to it than just me. And that's something you're not going to really have with a soulmate. Mm-hmm. Empathy and feelings and things like that, but you're not actually sharing, the same soul inside, right, if you will.
How does that work, if you like, in everyday living then?
Well, it's obviously a really, maybe I'm going to have to understand your question more, or you can articulate it a little bit more. I'm not sure exactly what you're asking me there.
I can understand how you communicate with your spiritual partner when you're both meditating separately. I mean, presumably you meet physically on a regular basis. How does that work? Do you find that you don't say anything because you're both thinking it, or you're answering each other's questions before they've been asked, or how does it work on a sort of practical level? That I can see it working at a distance, if you like, but when you're actually sitting together, or in a car or something driving along, how does that work?
Well, it works just like you kind of described, that in essence we're already speaking to each other, non-verbally, through telepathy and just through our own beingness. And oftentimes what we've experienced over the years is that we won't even speak physically, most of the time, because when we do, the ego tends to get in the way. And so then your human reflexes are there, and it can cause a little bit of problems. So it takes a little bit of balancing and practice. That's what the alchemical marriage is, really. It takes balancing and practice, really, to merge with each other within your own spirit body, so that when you're in those practical physical settings, all of that other noise is kind of out of the way. You've developed a love bond and an understanding of one another, and you like, for example, he'll say something to me in the physical world, and I have to stop before I answer him, and I have to go inside of myself and say, what does he mean? And then he'll say, okay, this is what I mean. And then I go, oh, okay. And then I'm able to respond to him in the physical world without having that reactive defensive kind of ego mechanism in place. So we've really learned to kind of take space before we communicate, so that in the physical world we're not harming each other or having those ego reactions, which tend to get in the way of love in any relationship.
No, I understand what you mean there. Yeah. Just going back, you mentioned when you were 4, you had a near-death experience. I believe that's when you nearly drowned. Is that the case?
Yes, yeah. I drowned when I was 4, or I should say, yeah, nearly drowned. And I've had several other experiences like that since, but that one really kind of, and by the way, when that happened, I also saw that yin yang, image in my mind. And I had this understanding of the yin yang, which turns out to be kind of the balance of the male female polarities within your own soul. So even as a 4-year-old, I had such a profound experience that I understood that there was that balance of the male female. And I was being raised at the time by my dad, who was a Mormon, and the Mormons believe that you can have multiple wives in heaven. And I remember being a little kid and hearing them talk about that at church, and I was so repulsed by it because of what I had seen when I went to heaven when I drowned.
Yeah.
And I was just like, no, that's not the way that it works. But, who listens to a 6-year-old or a 4-year-old?
Yes.
So I was kind of like, okay, yeah, something's wrong over here. But anyway, it turns out to be that over my lifetime, I was really profoundly shown that this was my being, my nature, and this put me on my spiritual journey.
Yeah. With I know it's a long time ago, but with the near-death experience, you hear a lot of people saying they have out-of-body experiences and they're sort of looking down on themselves from above, or that they are heading down tunnels, or there's clouds or various things. Can you remember the sensations you had?
I remember all of them like they were today. And like I said, I've had more than one experience. So I've had the ones you're talking about where I was floating above my body. But when I was 4, I didn't have that experience. I had the tunnel one where I was I was fighting to get out from under the water, and I didn't know how to swim. So I was just fighting to get over to where the stairs were. And as that was happening and I was losing oxygen and all of that, I was having a conversation with God, and I was saying, what do you mean I got to go home? I'm looking at my watch like, what do you mean? I just got here, And I was kind of ticked off because I had this understanding that I had just literally got to this planet, and I couldn't believe that I was having to go back. And I started to see the clouds, and I started to feel the peace, the tunnel of, just kind of like when you're walking into the gates of heaven and everything opens up and there's all these angelic beings standing there ready to embrace you and warmly loving you and holding you. And of course I saw the Christ energy or whatever you want to call that. And I got a lot of, obviously just awareness of full divine love for the soul, for myself and for all the beings that were there. And of course the peace and all of that. But like I said, I also had this vision of the yin yang, and it was like, I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like just having this all-knowing moment where you just see everything and you just have this knowingness about all that is, if you will. It's a glimpse in time, And then as far as I remember, after that, I was getting my stomach pumped, and all the fluffy stuff was gone, and I was laying there in a puddle of squishy stuff, getting brought back to life.
Did that, I mean, obviously it would have had a profound effect on you. Did it sort of change you as a child? You know, did you suddenly become a nice, caring child, or were you still like most kids, pulling little boys' hair at school, and generally, you know, did it make you different, if you like?
I'm pretty sure that it made me different. I don't know if I would have already different. I felt like I was, but it certainly made me very well aware of a lot of things. I was already talking to spirits, you know, at that age, and I was a weird kid after that, for sure. Very, very misunderstood.
Oh, that's lovely. And you've also mentioned about out-of-body experiences. Now, obviously, you had an out-of-body experience with the near-death experience, if you like. But with other ones, how has that worked? Has that been a unconscious experience, or was that something you consciously try and do? I mean, I've heard people, you know, trying to practice astral projection and, you know, lying on a bed and trying to float away from their body and do it consciously and things. How does it work with you on that?
Well, like I said, I've had several experiences that way throughout my life. So a lot of them were unconscious, or not, or I hadn't intended for it to happen. For example, another time when I was in my 20s, I fell asleep, and I was in a room. I noticed I was in a room and it was dark, and I was looking at something, and it looked like a body in a white, you know, something white. So I zoomed in to kind of get a better look. And it turns out that it was me, and I had been out of my body, floating above myself. And I guess I had fallen asleep with some gum in my mouth, and it flattened and kind of slid down my throat and cut off my air supply. And so I was having an out-of-body experience, and I realized that that was me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm dead. I'm dying. Like, you know, and I heard this voice say, well, do you want to be dead? And at the time, I had just lost my a partner who I really believed was my soulmate, you know, and I was devastated by his death, and I had been in depression for about a year. So my first instinct was, yes, I want to die. And then I was like, wait, no, I have a kid, no. And as soon as I thought that, boom, I woke up out of my sleep and sat up in my bed, and I realized that I was choking. But I have had other experiences where I got into, you know, meditative practices. And so with that, I've had several other types of experiences, including astral projecting and coming out of body at will, if you will. Yeah. And that took me a lot of years, I think, to practice into that type of meditation, because when I was younger, I was a bundled up ball of knots, and it would be really difficult to, you know, get yourself in a state of freedom to where you could kind of lift yourself out of your body that way. But over the years, I've kind of practiced doing that, the detachment from the earthbound kind of energies, so that I can come out of body on a regular basis.
Right. When you come out of your body, do you sort of travel somewhere, or is it simply you float, if you like?
Well, they're all different types of experiences. So sometimes it is just a floating, and sometimes it's literally, I can see my astral body just, you know, project out into space and just sit there in a beingness free from all that is. And then there are other times where I can literally astral travel to a location. If I want to go to where I came from is Utah, sometimes I'll get homesick, and I can travel there and smell the air and feel the energy there, and and then come back to my body and feel like I had just been there because my spirit was, Sometimes I find myself, traveling to places that like France to visit people that I don't even know. I know it must have been some past life connection or something, but I don't know who I was visiting there, but there's apparently people there that I'm connected to from who knows what.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, the stuff that we see as we dive into this, more and more. I kind of feel like we get shown more each experience that we have.
You're listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian.
Now, for people who are interested in doing it, is it safe to do this? Because I mean, you if you read fiction and things, you hear accounts of people doing it. Well, obviously it's not an account. It's a fiction. It's a story, but the person basically can't get back to their body. Are there risks like that?
I really believe that there are risks like that. I haven't personally had any experience that way in my later years when I started to consciously travel, but I have seen many things in other dimensions, including fourth dimensional entities, and they're not all benevolent. And so, if you're opening yourself to that kind of a thing, usually what I do is I connect with Source before I travel, and I ask for protection also, and I don't kind of hold those lower vibrations in my energy either anymore. But when I was younger and in my earlier days of being kind of young and dumb, right, I wasn't aware.
We've all
of
been
that.
there and done that, yes.
Right? You can't get old and wise without being young and dumb first.
Yes.
But in my earlier years, I did have some experiences where I had, some of those types of energies, and even recently, I've had some other demonic kind of energies that I was faced with. And I know in the spiritual community, everybody says, "Oh, it's all light and love." Well, at the end of the day, it's light and love, but on the way, it's not. So,
yeah.
Jeffrey Dahmer wasn't thinking light and love when he was doing the deeds that he was doing. And so there are energies and entities, and this would be what all of the religious teachings taught about, that there were beings that would possess you that aren't in the physical world anymore, and they've lost their right to a body, and they can access your body if you open it. So you do want to be, and don't go into it being afraid. Go into it with seeking the light to protect you, and wrapping yourself in that light first. So there's ways to do it, but I wouldn't even want to let that fear in my vibration. I would just want to go straight to Source. That's my, for me, I know how to do that, and hopefully others will learn how to do that before they try to delve into those practices, because you can be susceptible to having something try. But you have to remember that at the end of the day, you're also a free will soul. So, if something were to try to access your energy field, you have the right to command it away from yourself.
Yeah. When you've used a phrase a couple of times now, well, several times, going to Source. It's not one I'm familiar with. Could you explain a bit more about that?
Okay. So for me, how I understand Source being prime creator, Mother, Father, God, or the original prime creator of all that we are, the original, source of our light and love, if you will. But how I understood that is that during my heartbreak time, where I was having my heart ripped open, I was in full blown surrender to God. I was on my knees. I was bawling at the feet of God. I was begging for mercy, because I had suffered too much in so many experiences in my life, that I could see that I had failed everything I touched, and I knew I needed something that was bigger than me and higher than me to change my life and to heal me and to help me, because I just couldn't figure out why I was why I was having so many problems in life, getting my heart broken, and why was I on this planet? Why was I vulnerable to all of these negative things and, negative people and all that? And I went into prayer, and I got on my knees, and I asked for something higher than me. And when that happened, I was led to source, and I met God, if you will, or I saw the face of God, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, that's source. And of course, in that, I was shown that we're all connected, and we're one, we're one body of God in a sense, quantum physics. But anyway, source being the original prime creator, if you will.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah. The other topic you mentioned was the Akashic records. Now, my understanding of them is that they are a record of everything that has happened and will happen. Is that right? Or what's your take on it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. The Akashic records is like an etheric library that was revealed to me in when I went to source that time, and I was washed clean, and I was shown the Akashic records, and in that it is like an etheric library of not just what's been done and will be done, but even of thoughts. So it's the record of all thoughts and all deeds that have been and ever will be done on any timeline in the cosmos. It's mind-blowing. It's incomprehensible, really. But that we all have access to the Akashic records through our minds, and also through astral traveling. I think I remember watching a video shortly after this happened to me with one of the astronauts that figured out how to get the spaceship through something happens when the spaceship goes too high, and then they need it, and it kept causing them to blow up and catch on fire. And so he went into his dream state, and he was able to solve the problem by going into the astral realms to solve the problem. Well, you can access those astral realms, which is where the Akashic records are, either through your dream state or through meditative practices. And of course, there are methods. There's kind of this, the Egyptians taught that your heart had to be as light as a feather and that kind of a thing in order for you to access these higher dimensions. So you do have to reach certain levels of spiritual purification before you're even given access to them, just because you won't be able to. It doesn't work that way. So you kind of have to, in your own spirit, you have to go through your own spiritual soul work and go through forgiveness or repentance or whatever it is that you have to do in order to access these higher dimensions, because that's the spiritual way, and you're not going to get there any other way.
When you say the records, I mean, what is that like? Is it like a library of, when I hear people talk about it, I imagine it's sort of a huge, endless library of volumes, and everything is in there. I mean, what's how do you see it?
Well, for me, kind of what happened was it was sort of like Judgment Day, because I had to face God, the divine. And when that happened, I went to Source, and I was revealed to the Akashic records. It was like my Judgment Day. So I was shown every thought and deed that I ever had. I was shown every thought and deed that others had on me. So I saw that people had thought good things or bad things, and I heard all the thoughts and it was like this. It was just unbelievable, really. And that was just for my life chapter, like my life was one little book in the library of all these books in the infinite cosmos. So it was beyond something that's even really, I only could take in so much, For me, I was just shown all of these thoughts and all of these things and all of everything that had ever happened in my life and how it caused this, that, and the other, and things that people had thought behind my back, or deeds that I did that were bad, and how I hurt somebody else and it caused them to think this or to do that. And it was massive and it was profound, but it was similar to being on your Judgment Day, where you were, my heart had been weighed by the divine, and this was the outcome of all deeds, good and bad. There's a funny show on, what's it called? It's called The Good Place. There's a funny show on TV or in Netflix right now called The Good Place. Have you ever seen that?
No, I haven't, but I will look it up, yes.
You really should look it up. It's actually quite hilarious. And it really does kind of talk a little bit about, the whole spiritual experience that we're going through as humans. And The Good Place, it also references a little bit to do with the Akashic records because, in there, it's like they make a joke about the Akashic records, literally. Oh, this, you did this many times, said thank you to the lady in the checkout line, and this many times you did. And honestly, that's kind of what it's like. But they make fun of it a little bit. So it's a fun, a fun show to watch.
Yeah. With the records, then, as you say, they're covering multiple timelines and the like. Can you actually see things in the future so that you can avoid making a mistake?
Totally. I think that honestly, we all have this built into us. It's just part of it's our connection to our source. And so, you've heard many, many, many times in history, people dreaming things before they came true or whatever.
Yes.
Prophetic dreams and psychic thoughts and what do you call it? Deja vus and that kind of a thing. And I can kind of explain that a little bit. So there's a gap between space and time between the travel of light, right? Where our source of our soul is originally versus where we are in this dense reality in the third dimension. So it takes a couple of weeks usually to travel the distance between that area, right? And so if you dreamt it first, it's kind of like your soul already prepared, already planned it. It was already worked out in the higher dimensions. And by the time it happens in the physical world and you realize, oh my gosh, I dreamt about this a couple of weeks ago, it's because it already happened. You're just experiencing the physical manifest of it. But it had already happened in another dimension. So it's kind of interesting that way. But yeah, you most certainly can access even lifetimes of your own. So your own, this would be where quantum physics and quantum jumping and all that stuff might come into play. But you can access timelines with your own self where you're living on different planets and different experiences or past lives or future lives or any of that stuff, because it's infinite in the universe. It's infinite. It's beyond our comprehension as humans, really.
Yes.
You're listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian.
Yeah, the records aren't merely a list of all the good things and bad things you've done, but are potentially lessons to change your way of life.
I wouldn't say that. I would say that it's literally just a record of everything, thoughts, deeds, acts. Everything starts with a thought. So if anything, it's literally a library of all thoughts from all beings. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Imagine having a library that holds every single thought that ever happened in the whole universe from every single person on this in the cosmos.
Are you only able to, I don't know the details of it, that's why I'm asking these questions.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah. Are you able to access other people's records, or is it only your own you can see? You
can access other people's records, and you can also access, because again, it's thoughts or energy. So as you tap into it, like I can hear people's thoughts sometimes. I don't try to unless it happens, to be important to me. But you can access other people's records as well. And also you can see their life chart. So, and their life chart is part of the Akashic records as well, meaning that you can kind of see everything that's happened in their life. It's led them up to where they're at right now, and also kind of where it's leading them.
Yeah. But presumably you can see your own records of where it's leading you as well. Isn't that rather frightening?
Well, it's interesting because I've been shown a lot of things about where my life is going, sort of like a movie preview of future things in my life. But as a human, because we're still in the human form as well. So on the human level there, it's kind of like I saw it, I have an understanding of it on a soul level, but every single detail isn't in the forefront of my mind right now. It would be too hard for me to focus on my day today if I was fully aware of every single thought, deed, action, move, maneuver, accident, and whatever was going to happen in my whole future. So it's like you get this impression on a soul level or a vision or something, and it impresses you. So you have this remembrance and this knowing of this is, what it's going to be like. But I don't think that we're really meant to have this whole full awareness of it every step of the way. It would just be too much for us. So I think to some degree, our high soul, protects us a little bit there, gives us just what we need so that we can keep, following the crumbs, precept upon precept.
Yes, I was going to say, because that always seems to me, if you want to know everything, it's rather going to take away the point of living if you know everything that's going to happen and when you're going to die and everything like that. There's no mystery, whereas the enjoyment of life is waking up on a morning and not being sure what's going to happen next.
Exactly. And the awesome thing is that it's there, so you can go there if you need something. If I really, really, really need the answer to something that I'm stumbling with in my physical life, then I can just stop and meditate and go to source and ask the question and seek the Akashic records and find the answer. And then I'm good and I can move on. But for me to walk around, our brains couldn't even handle holding all of that light knowledge at one time. It's too much. Our heads would explode.
Yes.
So we know we can access it. I've accessed it. I saw what it is. I've visited there when I need it, but I don't walk around trying to have all that knowledge in my brain at once. There's no way. There's no way anybody could.
There's that, and it would take away free will as well, wouldn't it? You wouldn't be doing what you're doing. You'd be almost working to a script, and it would rather limit what you were going to do with your life.
Well, kind of, except for the fact that we have parallel lives, and so you in one dimension, in one planet, you might be living the life of a poverty-stricken painter or whatever, and in another life or another reality, another planet, another somewhere in the cosmos, you might be living as a king, and you have all these multiple realities that are happening simultaneously in the universe that you could alter your path in this life. Let's say you were that poverty-stricken painter. If you really wanted to, you could tap in and you could alter that by changing, by tapping into your higher self and connecting to maybe some other aspect of yourself somewhere in some timeline, and then implementing that knowledge in this life. So you can use it to your good. It's not necessarily that it's going to get in the way of free will. Free will is we could do a whole nother segment on free will too, because it's kind of a paradox. Like as long as I'm doing free will for whatever I want to do, if it's not serving the divine will, I'm going to be in trouble. So I've kind of learned to use my free will to do the divine's will, so that whatever is my highest outcome, I'm choosing to use my free will for that, to follow the divine's will instead of my own, because I've used my own and saw that that's where all my problems came from.
Yeah, no. I'm totally with that's various other belief systems have that view that free will doesn't mean do anything you want.
Right.
It's living your life more living your life to the full, but
right.
But not doing whatever you want at the expense of everybody else. Yeah. That always causes a bit of confusion. Yes,
exactly.
Do what thou wilt type of thing. Yeah.
Got to be careful there, huh? And there's a lot of people that unfortunately maybe haven't integrated that and got the balance right there. But yeah, That's a whole nother story. But no, I don't think it interferes with your free will. I think, again, you can literally just access it for whatever you need it for at any time. And so that it's nice to know that it's there. It's nice to know how to access it in doing your own spiritual practices and things like that, so that you can use it to assist you in your life. But trying to walk around with all that knowledge in your brain, it's not realistic. And I don't think any of us could, our bodies couldn't handle all of that knowledge. We'd disintegrate, really.
Yes, we'd be like in the movie Scanners, our brains would explode or something.
Exactly.
Yes. With your life, how much time do you spend involved in your spiritual practices? I mean, does it allow you, are you doing it all the time, or do you have, if you like, a day job and you can get on with that, and you can look to your spiritual practices in addition to that?
Well, that's a good question. And that is a tricky one, I think, for most of us in Ascension, because when I first had my awakening, before I even had my awakening, I 100% just dropped my work, dropped everything, and went into my spiritual studies, because I realized that my life was not worth living, and I didn't want to live it the way I had anymore. So I 100% devoted myself to my spiritual studies for a few months, and then I had my awakening, and then that just blew my mind. And of course, I went through madness. I'm sure you've probably heard other people talk about that, where I put everything in storage, and I went and lived in my car, and I would go out and spend all my days in nature and learning to connect with the divine and all that. And it was really a profound experience. And then I got back on my feet and got a normal job, and spent some years doing that again while I was doing my spiritual studies and practices, and learning to integrate the energy with my twin flame and all of that. And then I went through another experience again that was quite profound. That's where I quit smoking, and I had this, it was really interesting. I saw demonic energy trying to feed on my body while I had been smoking. So I gave up the addiction stuff, and that put me back into full-time spiritual mode, and just full-time, spending every day following whatever the spirit's guidance was. And of course, work. I think that part of the ascension journey, a lot of people are going to realize too, that it's somewhere along the way we get guided to turn our work into our spirituality into our work, or to connect the two, so that even our work life is a form of spirituality. Everything sort of becomes spiritual to me. Everything, really. My family, my relationships, my pets, everything is a spiritual experience for me.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that, of course, we don't have physical jobs and need to have, physical income and that kind of a thing. And I think that that's been a screwy topic for a lot of people in Ascension, is that they get really kind of screwy about that, because they think that money's a bad thing, and and then they hate everybody that has it, but they're miserable because they're sitting in the gutter.
Yeah.
And that's a problem too.
Yes.
So it takes a lot to kind of balance that, the spiritual awareness with your physical world, and to make the two of them work together.
Yeah. You mentioned people who are in ascension. Can you explain that term?
Oh, ascension? Okay. Well, ascension would be where you have this awakening again, where you remember that you're an eternal soul, and you're not just this human, you're not just this person, going to work every day and paying bills and paying taxes and dying. That you're so much more. And after you have this profound awakening, then you go through ascension, which is essentially where you integrate what you saw and what you remember on a soul level with your physical life. But also, you're shedding from your own being things that really aren't true to your soul. So for me, that would have been things like, smoking and drinking and all that. And boy, did I ever love doing those things. But, but as I really became, true to my soul, then I realized that doing those things was not making my soul happy. And I was putting poison in my body, and it was causing harm to myself, and it was going to give me a miserable death if I didn't change it. And I was becoming sick from it. And that really wasn't the person that I am. It wasn't true to me. And another one would have been the dating that I did before I met my twin flame and my true, counterpart, was that I was always dating, these people and having casual sex and that kind of a thing. And at the end of the day, it really hurt my soul. And I had to be honest with myself at some point and say, something, I'm not happy like this. I just want that one person that I love that loves me. And I don't want to be, dating all these people and not having love be there and all that. And so, that's part of ascension, is to really become true to yourself and find out, who are you and what do you really, really, really want and what makes you happy, and why are you doing the things that aren't making you happy? You say that you want this, you say you want a true love, but you're not being a true lover, and that kind of a thing. So you go through a lot of layers of peeling away the things within yourself that you bought into in this physical world that really aren't true to who you are on a soul level.
Sorry, so it's almost, if you like, enlightenment you're talking about.
It's part of enlightenment, definitely.
Yeah.
It's like you get that awakening that causes you to become enlightened, and then you go through ascension to embody that enlightenment.
Right. Yes. I'm familiar with the concept of enlightenment. Yes.
We've gone in so many different directions in this little bit of conversation that it's a lot, I think, to take in, because maybe not everybody's had a death experience, or maybe not everybody's really gotten into the meditative states. Maybe not everybody's even, I'm glad that you're bringing up even what is ascension, because maybe not everybody's even heard of it. I'm so delved into it that I kind of tend to just yap on and not realize that there's probably a lot of people that don't know what the heck I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm asking some quite basic questions, because I say I know some of the stuff, but I don't know all of it, and some of the terms you use I'm not familiar with, and I know a lot of other people are the same, and obviously some terms mean different things to other people. Now, is your belief system? I mean, I know you mentioned you were with the Mormons when you were a child, but is it linked to any particular religion, or is it something people of any faith could pursue?
It's for all beings. I have no religious connection at all. I studied many different religions. I just happened to be born in the Mormon, Christian kind of belief system. But I studied throughout the years, and like I said, I was born, coming out of skin and talking to ghosts and things like that. And I knew about reincarnation, and my dad, who's Mormon, and the Mormons don't even believe in reincarnation, but I saw when I had my death experience that I had been reincarnated many times. And so I don't connect with any religious faith. I connect with all of them, if you will.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean, so basically there's truth in all things, not to be misconstrued that all things are true. And so I can connect with any belief system and find truths within it and that, but that doesn't mean that I'm connected to any of them, because I don't, the creator, the source, love, God, whatever you want to call it, that I know is all encompassing for all beings.
I know you said you haven't read the Akashic records to see what's happening in your future, but from where you are now, how do you see yourself moving forward? Have you got any ambitions in your spiritual self as opposed to your day job or anything like that. Where do you see yourself progressing now?
Well, that's a good question. I did see futuristic stuff in my Akashic records, and I was given a life chart, kind of, if you will, or a movie of my life. So I was shown things, and of course, in my physical dense humanness, I only remember certain things, or certain things were impressed on me.
Yeah.
So I kind of have a futuristic understanding of my life path, but right now I'm in a stage called Dharma, where I'm stepping into my soul's mission. I've gone through the alchemical marriage with my counterpart, and we have gone through many, many, many years of purification and shedding and all of that, to where we're now kind of embodying the soul mission. And so I am getting ready at this time. I've been working on a couple of books, and I'm getting ready, hopefully within the next year, to have at least 1 or 2 books published. And my life's work really is about this soul, is about the soul experiences. I was born for it. I was born having death experiences and drowning and suffering, and until I finally came to enlightenment and going through this ascension and all that. But I am being guided now that that's my life's work somehow, is to teach.
Yeah. And Dharma, I mean, that's a Buddhist type concept, isn't it?
It is a Buddhist type concept. My understanding of it, and why I use that term, is that it's basically where at some stage in your journey you go through so much healing within your own self. You've healed all of your past karma. You've overcome many layers of your own traumas that you've experienced and healed through them, to where you can then take what you learned from your own suffering and turn it into a gift for others. So it's kind of like alchemy, but it's turning it into your life's work, basically.
It's your true calling. Would that be a...
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's not an easy one to step into, at least not for me, because, I went so far off the path of my own original soul, calling, that in my life, I kind of went another direction for so many years that I built my ego personality around that other person. So to come back and step into what my life's mission it takes a lot. You have to let go of the person you thought you were at this job or this career or whatever, and you have to let it all go and go fully into your soul's calling and your soul's mission, which can be really intimidating. There's no money sitting there looking at you going, here you go, come and get it. You have to completely devote yourself to trusting in your spirit and where it's guiding you at all times. And a lot of people it's intimidating, which is why a lot of people don't do it.
Yeah. So essentially it's gaining enlightenment and almost reinventing yourself in a spiritual way, and shedding all the trappings, I suppose you'd say, the commercial world that everybody goes for, must have a new car, must have a nice house, must do this, must do that, all those targets that you people drive themselves for.
That's exactly what it's like. And it's shedding off it's detaching yourself from anything really mortal. You're in the mortal world and you're living in it, but you're not attaching to it, because if you attach to it, you can become earthbound and reincarnate again. So why would you want to do that? And yet at the same time, going in the other direction and letting go of that mortal world is also painful, because you've built your whole self around it.
Yeah. And
so it's kind of, you go through, believe me, enlightenment is gruesome. It's a gruesome experience, It's definitely not fun either which way. And the only time it gets fun is when you finally have overcome, whatever the next lesson was, and you get a little breathing room and go, okay, I'm free. My soul's free. There's no more pain. But that pain comes from being attached to anything that's earthly, that's not true to your soul.
Just by way of sort of wrapping up this, and I say I'd love to speak to you again on another time, but
sure,
for people who are interested in this and would like to follow a similar path, I'm not saying they should seek near-death experiences, but where would you start in your quest to become enlightened, or to become ascended? Where would be a starting point?
Well, obviously, any form of meditation, prayer, and just getting into the beingness of your own soul in nature, or anywhere where you can just tune the world out and get into a state of peace within yourself, so that you can hear the silent screams of your soul. And
well, that's cheery,
isn't it? But they're nice screams. They're nice screams. It's a love thing, but it's getting into that peaceful state where you can actually hear, because your ego is such a loud voice. It's always yelling and screaming in your head, and your ego's not true to you. It's not your true self. And so that's the voice that you're used to hearing in your head all day long. Yap, 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 we got to do this and we got to do that. And, bop, 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 bop. And when you get in the peaceful state where you can go in nature and just listen to silence, is when you can hear the whispers of your soul. And until you really get practiced at that, you're most likely, your spirit's, buried somewhere and desperately asking you to hear it. So getting into a practice of being able to, get into a peaceful state of being to where you can hear those whispers it's really important. Not just for your own self and for your own happiness, but it's important for the world that we all get ourselves into a state of peace like that, and not allow, the chaos and fear and things like that to control you, because it's not really real, and it's not really true to who you are and what you're here for either. And you're only going to suffer if you're only listening to that and you're not listening to your soul. Those loud screams or silent screams, they're really just saying, hey, I love you, and hey, go over here and you'll be safer over here, or here's a better job over here, or wait, that mate that's punching you at night doesn't really love you. I have a better one for you. So if you just can get yourself into that type of practice to where you listen to that silence, then your whole entire life is going to be better.
That's a wonderful concept and explanation there, and I think a very good spot to end this talk on. I say that was really very interesting, and I say I'd love to speak to you again for another show on some other topics. So just remains for me to say, Ellen Red, thank you ever so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
And that's it. We're totally out of time. Just remains for me to say thank you very much for listening, and I do hope you'll join me again same time next week. Till then, this is Charles Christian saying, stay well, stay weird, stay different. Good night.
Black Shuck, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon, which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic and folklore. You can keep in touch with us online at www.weirdtalesradio.com, by email to weirdtales@icloud.com, and on Twitter @ChristianUncut. Join us again next week for another edition of the Weird Tales radio show. Good night.
This podcast is a part of Straight Up Strange Productions. Discover more shows like this one at straightupstrange.com.